You ready? 1, 2. No, thank you for a beautiful film.
Thanks for inviting it to ReelAbilities. Yeah.
Tell me where it started, where this came from.
It starts as, I guess, all good movies do, with the writer. It started with Duncan Paveling, who he comes from the environment of care. He is a trained counsellor. He works with individuals and families that are affected by learning disability, as we call it in the UK. I think it's intellectual difficulties elsewhere. And he was so inspired by, he's a writer as well, or it's his day job is a counsellor, and he was so inspired by the people he met that he, and by the dearth of roles that are out there for people with a disability, that he wanted to celebrate the people he knew. And that was the script that came out. He worked in close collaboration with Jane Gold, the director. They were introduced by a mutual friend. And then, some 18 months down the line after that, I came on board when they'd already cast the 4 lead actors, but needed to push it over the edge, get the financing in place, and get the film shot. And I was only too happy to have this be my debut feature as a producer. I was actively looking for my debut feature as a producer and wanted to work with Jane. And so we all got around the table in the end, and My Feral Heart was the script that stood out amongst all others I was reading.
And of course, this is not an easy film to make. How, as a producer, as far as both the fundraising side, the selling it to get all the people on board for it, how difficult was that? How hard of a process was it to really put the pieces together?
I won't swear, but I think there's a moment, I think, in any production where you get to the precipice and you jump and you just fingers crossed that you land. And it wasn't quite that reckless, but it was fairly reckless in the sense that when I first met Duncan for the three of us around the table for the first time, and I was clearly smitten with the script and with Jane as a director, and wanted to come on board, and we agreed that was a good thing. And then the next question from Jane and Duncan to me was, we've penciled in, this was July 31st, 2014, we penciled in a start date of, I think it was the last week in October. So 3 months, basically. And we did our maths. We were putting in some of our own money. They say don't ever do that, but this is quite a low-budget movie, so it's not huge amounts. And we had pledges for the same amount from 2 friends of Duncan's, who were 2 of our exec producers that are credited there. And so we took the choice. Made the decision that really to cover our backs and to be able to pay people and not let anyone down financially. We had a relatively small amount to raise. It wasn't enough to complete the film, but we decided that if we dragged our heels, we certainly wouldn't make it to this October start date. We didn't make it to the October start date. It was a week later, but we did pretty well. But yeah, I think Jane and Duncan had some good ideas already. The film was shot in an area that we all know very well. Coincidentally, we didn't grow up together, but we were all from the same area in Essex. So we all had fairly good knowledge of the area, and Jane and Duncan had been thinking about the script and kicking it around for a while. Locations were already in mind, and a little bit of the groundwork was done. So it was just a case of closing those off. The principal cast were done, so Jane and I just had to set up casting for the supporting cast. It came together pretty smoothly, I've got to say. I mean, it was hard work, you're right, but it was enjoyable work, and we got away with it.
Well, we're definitely not.
Shot in November as well, by the way, in the UK, and I'm sure it did look cold in some of the shots, but we were very, very lucky with the weather. So in terms of getting away with it, the weather was kind to us.
Tell me about the casting. How did you find your lead, and how was it working with him?
Well, I wasn't there for the original castings. I came on for the secondary round. But the story, there's an anecdote behind how Stephen was found. And it's indicative. There's a panel on diversity in roles in the media happening just after this, and this is relevant. Jane put the casting call out for an actor with Down syndrome, because the lead character had Down syndrome. They got 70 people turn up for the audition, and only 2 had Down syndrome. Yeah, go figure. Neither one got the part. And Jane went casting at a local inclusive theatre company in Essex, close to where we were filming, and went to cast the residents of Blossom House and do workshops with them and get to know them and see if they were up for it. And that's where she met Stephen. And the rest is history. I mean, I could go on. But it was she met him and she was like, this guy's perfect. And yeah.
And he had no background.
It turned out to be. He had no background in acting, bar the workshops he had done with this inclusive theatre company. We were actually told by the lady she's such a fantastic woman, told by the lady that runs the theatre company, don't cast him. She's very straight. She goes, don't cast him, he won't turn up. He'll let you down. He's let us down before. He's a lovely guy, but he'll let you down. She's not being harsh. She was being harsh to be fair to us. She didn't want to put us in a bad situation, but we pushed on. And 2 weeks before we were filming, might have even been a week, his mum phoned up Jane, the director, and said, I think you should get someone else. He won't turn up, you know. Obviously, we couldn't at that stage, and we didn't want to. Jane had done a lot of work with Stephen, but he turned up. He was the first up out of bed in the family, getting his dad out of bed. They had an hour drive to set every day. And he was first up, knocking on his dad's door. Come on, we're going to set. So I think it was just a case of, he loved it, and the crew loved him, and there was a great camaraderie on set. Stephen brought an extra energy to set. I've been making films for years and years as an assistant director, and never with someone with a disability, and never with someone who has Down syndrome. And Stephen's contribution is like no other film I've worked on. It was such a joy. It was a joy once he turned up on set. He brought a lot of love with him, and that was great. I think that comes across in the film.
Completely. And let me just ask about, and then we'll open it to questions from the audience. What have been the reactions? Where has the film gone? Who's seen this wonderful film?
Well, we're kind of full circle. We started in America. We had our world premiere at the CineQuest Film Festival on March the 5th, 2016. So like I said, it's almost full circle that we're back. I'm back in America screening it again. It went down very well there. Got the Audience Award for Best Feature, Best Narrative Feature at CineQuest. Got honourable mention at Fargo after that. So America's been very kind. Got another honourable mention at Woodstock. It's been very warmly received by audiences. We've been very fortunate in that regard. Yeah, it's been to Singapore. Opened up a disabilities festival there. We had our UK premiere at Edinburgh, which is one of the greatest feathers in our cap. It wasn't in competition. It didn't win any awards, but that laurel on your poster is certainly very good for a UK audience.
Edinburgh is a good place to be.
Yeah, so it's.
And has it gone? Does it have distribution in the UK? Or?
Oh gosh, don't get me started. No is a quick answer. What do you want to know? It's an incredibly frustrating process for us because we pushed it out independently in the end. We did cinema on demand in the UK, and what that basically means, you've got it in this country through an organisation called Tug. In the UK, it's Our Screen. In Australia, it's Fanforce. There's these fantastic opportunities now for independent producers. If they've got the time and the energy and a little bit of money, you can push a film out independently at relatively no risk. Because the cinemas, you don't pay the cinema. You market it like you would do crowdfunding, and people just buy a ticket. And if you sell enough tickets, the screenings go ahead. So we use that model to kickstart our theatrical release. And we were very fortunate, and what that allowed us to do was get critical reviews in the UK, and we got fantastic critical reviews. The BBC's top critic, Mark Kermode, fell in love with it and shouted from the rooftops. We got 4-star reviews in The Guardian. So it went down very well, and off the back of that, I became very, very busy as a distributor because the cinemas started booking it directly with me. So what started out as 10 screenings in November, we're now still screening it. We've got a whole tranche of screenings coming up for World Down Syndrome Day, and we will have done more than 100 screenings by the time it finishes. But, and that's why I've gone on at length, we still don't have distribution. People still haven't picked it up. Well, I'm hoping that's going to change. I think you've got to be careful who you partner up with, and sometimes you get the wrong partner, not because people are bad or anything, but just it isn't a good fit. I think we didn't have a good fit for the last 18 months, and we're looking to rectify that at the moment. And you know, I've got people knocking on my door now, actually coming out the woodwork and saying, I just found out you don't have distribution. We're a distributor. I want to talk to you. This is insane. So yeah, fingers crossed this will all change.
It's definitely a worthy film for major mainstream distribution. I'd love to open it now to questions, comments, thoughts from the audience.
What's the relationship between fox hunting and disabled?
There's no relationship. It's set in a rural environment. It's set in the rural environment because that's the setting for the Feral Heart. So, in terms of it being a wild setting, it's an untamed environment, and it's an untamed heart in the sense, on many levels. We can talk about this for some time, but obviously one obvious level is the feral girl that he meets. But the fox hunting is really it's something that's very much part of people of a certain standing in the countryside. So, and it's something they do as a pastime, and it's been very controversial. And it seemed to, I think, I can't talk for Duncan. We never talked about this. I never questioned it, to be honest with you. It's fitted the milieu, if you like. It fitted the setting. But it's there as an external, in narrative terms, it's there as to create the climax for the external conflict between Pete and his father. That's a very obvious way that they clash externally. They've got internal conflicts to resolve, but that's the external personification of that. And of course, it fits in with a reading of what the girl may be up until. I mean, it is confirmed at the end, I hope for you, that she is a girl. But there is, we wanted to leave it open to interpretation up to that point, because I think it's the film is about care in a very general sense. And yeah, I mean, there's a long story about the duality of the girl and whether she's a fox or whether she's a girl, and I could go into it. It was a debate in post-production. It wasn't really on the page, but obviously that does fit well with the fox hunting. But there wasn't any real connection between disability, and I think if Duncan were here and if Jane were here, they'd stress the point that it's a film about ability, not disability. We wanted to reframe the perception of what it is to be disabled or have Down syndrome, and rather than have there's a lot of emphasis on what's wrong with people who've got Down syndrome, and we wanted to emphasise what's right, if you like.
We have a question up there.
To what extent did Stephen form the character of Luke and work in the workshop? To what extent did he seed the character?
Okay, I think it's very difficult to extract any actor from a part they're playing. They're always going to give a part of themselves, but there's a huge amount of Stephen in Luke, and I think that's partly just through Kismet that we met Stephen, and he was so like the character on the page. But there's no doubt that I'm forever referring to Luke as Stephen, and the other way around, and that's I think he is so like Luke in his personality. Bit of a cheeky chap and a very loving chap. Really great company, if I'm honest. Shame he isn't here. We couldn't get him out here on this occasion, but there is one specific thing which is entirely Stephen, which is his tattoo. That wasn't in the script until Stephen was cast. The first time Duncan met Stephen, he straight away started showing him his tattoos, and so Duncan was like, right, that's going in. And again, keeping on the theme of being wild and foxes and things like that, it happens to be a lion, which is quite fortunate. But we didn't draw it on him. That's real.
Hi, thank you. Everything you said about the focus on ability, that really was communicated so strongly. But what I was particularly moved by, I thought the filming was exquisite. Every moment of it seemed to communicate the intent. Wherever the character was in the frame, it was not only beautiful, but it communicated whether it was loneliness or fear. It just came across so clearly.
Yeah, it was incredibly well thought out. I've got to give a lot of credit to every single craft in the film. Jane and particularly Suzanne Salavati. When we talk about ticking diversity boxes, we've got a female DOP and a female director and a disabled lead. But yeah, that wasn't intentional either. But Susie's fantastic. There's nothing of her. She's like a stick. And a lot of it was handheld. I've been working with Susie for about 12 years on and off on different projects in different roles. I met her first as a spark, so she's an electrician basically. She's learnt the trade from the ground up, and she's just brilliant. And her and Jane have a really good relationship. And Jane spent as much time with Susie, if not more, than she did with the actors in prep. They're always in a huddle, exchanging notes and creating a shorthand to make sure that we could move fast on set and get what we got. Susie had very little to work with. But it isn't just down to the cinematographer. That's huge on this film, what she managed to create. And we were very clear that we wanted the landscape to be a character in the film. And we were very clear that we wanted to create distinct spaces in the film. So you had the very real world of Stephen at home with his mother and the very real world of Stephen at home in the care home. But we wanted his time with the girl to be, it's more magical realism. So I've not had the obvious question about the girl yet, but that's more magical realism. So a lot of it doesn't make direct sense, but we're exploring a different level of, a little bit more of a heightened level of expression, I think, there. But we were so lucky with the crew. The crew were just fantastic. I mean, it was trying conditions, and everybody was really bought into it. And a very young crew that done a lot of time on some pretty bad sets. I think they were quite pleased that they were making something good, and they were making. We thought it was good. I'm being a bit arrogant, but
no, we could say it.
And they said a few times that a few of them, the gaffer. I mean, gaffers never say anything to you about this. They're like, oh, this is one I actually want to see.
Nobody knows what a gaffer is here.
Yeah, gaffer, best boy, chief electrician. Salavati.
Thank you. Do we have time for one last question here? Yeah, Tom?
I'm curious about the other residents of the care home. And I felt when Stephen Luke goes to the care home, it's a little bit of a dangerous moment because you feel that maybe he's feeling somewhat superior, for lack of a better word, that there's some issues there. Although he also is now put in a very social.
Yeah,
He's been living on his own. So
I know the moment. I know the moment you mean.
yeah. So I'm just curious about the other people and how that scene was, thought more about that scene.
That scene, first of all, a little look behind the curtain, that was just my favourite day of filming ever on a film set, and it was utter chaos. We got the guys from the Mushroom Theatre Company along. They all had a character name. They had all done their backstory with Jane. They'd all workshopped it. They were very much. They weren't just shoved in front of a camera and told to get on with it. They owned their characters. They owned that space of being residents of that care home. And actually, but then they did just turn up and have a good day out. And we didn't really force them into situations. We just made a decision that in order to get their characters across, which is the best part of their characters is themselves, we would just have to film pretty much documentary style and just jump in and change Stephen's top for a different day when it was necessary. So that they had a great time. And in terms of what you're touching on there, do you step towards a dangerous area of if you like, making them less normal than Stephen? It is a subjective moment, and it is Luke's reaction to being there. He's just come from a situation where it's just him and his mother, where he is the carer, not the cared for, and all of a sudden, I think what it does do well in narratively is make you feel his uncomfortableness. He feels like a fish out of water, and he is a fish out of water. He isn't really, and certainly the scene which parallels that later towards the end, where he draws the egg, the face on the egg again, that's a completely different vibe, and he's very happy, and he's at one, and he accepts that where he is and what his life is, not in the sense of giving up, but just of things are going to be all right. And I think it's important to get the juxtaposition of those scenes and not just flatline it in terms of that kind of... Yeah, he does, and that's where they're going. I just want to say, you might be itching to ask it, and you can ask me later if we're running out of time, but hopefully not. But you're the first audience not to ask me about why did we end it that way.
Well, I was thinking about saying how I like the end.
But we haven't got any time.
Yeah, too late. I like the end.
So why did you end it that
It's
way?
usually the first question out of the gate. I've got to be honest. Where did the girl come from? Oh, why did you end it that way? Okay, the stock answer, and we're short on time, and so I'll use the stock answer. Luke doesn't question where the girl comes from. He just sees someone in need and he helps her. And that's kind of the strong message of the film, I hope. And so why should we care where she comes from? She just is there, and she just does need help. And she does go on a very visible journey herself. For me, she gets left out of a lot of reviews as a character because people don't know what to make of her. But in narrative terms, she travels the furthest distance. She goes from being a petrified animal-like creature who only uses her voice to save herself and to scare people off, and trusts no one. And then by the end of it, she learns to care and learns to love and learns to use her voice for another reason. And so from that, as much as anything, more than anything, that's where I take the hope out from in the film, is that someone as remotely attached to our reality is able to learn to care. Anyway.
James, thank you so much. Very human story, very, I think, international, universal story too.
And Jane, who would have been here if she could have made it, sends her love and thanks and wishes she could be here, but unfortunately can't.
Next time. Folks, next up in this room is